In progress.
Good evening, everyone. I am CA Yash Kunawat, the moderator of the webinar. We are delighted to welcome you all to this webinar, which is being organized by Continuing Professional Education Committee of ICI. Please block your calendar for CP webinar on Wednesdays and Fridays. We request you to please block your calendar for the same. It is my pleasure to be the moderator for 63rd webinar on Code of Ethics, Case Studies and Recent Decision on Eligibility of ITC on Inward Supplies. In a short while, we will start this webinar. First, I would like to apprise you about the CPE committee. In today's ever-changing professional scenario worldwide, the biggest challenge the professionals face is how to stay on the top of the game while adapting to new requirements and norms. Therefore, it is imperative to aim to be up to date, to offer unique guidance, influence others with their innovative approach and expertise. It is also vital to stretch old ideas beyond traditional boundaries to create new perspectives. In this context, continuing professional education facilitates professionals to maintain, improve, and broaden their knowledge, skills, and expertise required to achieve their professional goals through webinars, seminars, etc. The program for this evening is as follows. We have two sessions of 1 hour each, and the topics are: first, Code of Ethics case studies taken by CACA in Wazesa. Second, analysis of recent decision on eligibility of ITC on genuine inward supplies taken by CA Arpit Haldia sir. Our eminent speakers will talk about the above mentioned emerging areas of professional interest. Without taking much time, I'll just read out the brief profile of CA Chandrasekhar Waze sir, who is going to take on Code of Ethics. He practiced as a chartered accountant for more than 40 years. He has delivered lectures and written articles on taxation, banking, and elite subjects, and on Code of Ethics of CAs. He has held many responsible positions in many organizations and has delivered lectures and written articles on Valmiki Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and many other social subjects. Recipient of renowned awards like Yoga Mitra Award, Best Social Worker Award, Jal Dastur Award, etc. Before inviting CA Waze sir, I would just like to place on record that more than 340 participants have already joined us for this webinar. Without taking much time, I invite Waze sir to please start the session.
Namaskar and good afternoon. It's nice to hear that more than about 340 participants are there today. In fact, I am told that the chairman and vice chairman of CP committee will be joining a bit later. But I must place on record my very sincere thanks to both of them for this wonderful opportunity. And I must also acknowledge the efforts taken by Mr. Akshat Kumar, and Guinea is always there from CP committee, and Mr. Yash Kunawat who for my introduction. In fact, Yash in his introductory remarks rightly mentioned that this particular topic is assuming more and more importance in today's life because the profession of the chartered accountancy is becoming more and more vulnerable. And that is why whatever activities we are doing, we must be very cautious. And for that, I give compliments to the CPE committee for fixing this particular topic, and that is on case studies. Friends, I spoke on 22nd of October on topic of Code of Ethics, but since it was Diwali, I did not want to spoil the mood of the audience because normally they say that my lectures, especially on Code of Ethics when I deal with case studies, are a little frightening. And that day the topic was ethical life a celebration? Because since it was a festival, I thought that the underlying principle of celebration is that one should be fearless. And the fearlessness can come only when you are ethical. If you are compromising with ethics, then you can never be fearless. And that is why I had linked that topic with the celebration or celebrative mood. But today, the topic is that of case studies. Usually, I require at least 3 to 4 hours to deal with it. So, the first challenge is to curtail it into the or condense it into this very short time. In fact, Mark Twain once wrote to his friend very longish letter. And at the end, he said, "Please excuse me for this very long letter because I did not have time to write a short letter." So, when you have to condense something, you need much more time. But, friends, very frankly, I have handled practically a few hundred cases of disciplinary mechanism, and therefore it was a challenge for me as to which cases to select. The theme and the purpose of this presentation is that the cases which I have myself handled, because you may be aware that our institute has three wonderful publications on code of ethics. Volume 1 is that of the general principles philosophy, which has been adopted from the IFAC, or you can say that international ethical standards, which is adapted to the Indian conditions. That is volume 1. Volume 2 is basically the act, rules, guidance notes, and other things. And the volume 3 contains the case laws. But very honestly, friends, here each case is so different that the case laws would be hardly of any help. But whatever decided cases are there now today, because of this, they are into public domain now. So you can always refer to those cases. But the cases which we describe only what is on record, since I am sharing the cases which I have myself handled, I can take you something behind the curtain what happens, what are the motivations, what prompts the people to file cases against the chartered accountants. And that nuisance value has increased so much that the cases have become very rampant. In fact, the pendency is so huge that despite having four benches of the disciplinary committee, there is a lot of pendency which is still remaining. The statistics is really mind blowing because every day quite a few complaints are being lodged, and nowadays even the regulators have become very active. Now there is a difference between a complaint and the information case, which I will deal in due course of time. But basically, what I wanted to impress upon you is that our institute's motto is Ya Esha Supteshu Jagrati. That means he who is awake when the world around is asleep. Chartered accountants are expected to be awake, not merely physically when there is a tax season that we are there, that time we work round the clock, but awake by that we mean you should always be alert and agile because people are there now to take undue advantage of our disciplinary mechanism. They are abusing our disciplinary mechanism, the machinery of disciplinary cases, and unfortunately, since there is no unity among chartered accountants, everyone has become so vulnerable, which I'll be sharing with you how it happens. Now, ya esha sukteshu jagrati, there's another version of it is na bhayam chasti jagrata. He who is awake, he has nothing to fear about. Friends, the first case I would like to share with you is that, and the underlying principle is that you should not do any activity whatsoever in your profession in good faith. The concept of good faith you must totally eradicate from your mind. Because if you do anything in that, you are sure to invite trouble. The first case is very interesting, and all these cases are eye opening. There was a case where husband and wife both were chartered accountants, both were practicing independently. They were not having into partnership. Now there was a small cooperative housing society, and the wife did the audit of that society for 3 years. Then, because of the rotation, there was a change in the auditor, and the husband did it for the 3 years later. In the eighth year, there was a divorce petition between the two, and the wife filed a case saying that the husband took the audit without obtaining her NOC. So the things have gone that far. That means, remember, no relationships are permanent. Today in the Kali Yuga, no relation is permanent, and that is why if you are too over friendly with any client, don't be under an impression that that client will always support you or he will never ditch you. In fact, I always say that when chartered accountants boast that I have been handling the matters of this particular group for last 30 years and that I am like a family member to them, then I always request them, such chartered accountants, to enhance their fees just by 5% and see whether you still continue to be the family member of that client. Friends, clients are ruthlessly commercial. They are not bothered as to what pains you will undergo once they file a complaint. And many of the complaints are arising, more than 90% of the complaints are arising out of the disputes of some other parties. Like the partners are disputing, directors are disputing, there is a dispute between two other parties, and then the chartered accountant being the softest target, it can be victimized very easily. So that is the reason why chartered accountants are subjected to or susceptible to such disciplinary cases. The second case again is very interesting. A chartered accountant was sitting in his office and he was handling the tax audit of a proprietary client. Once the married daughter of that proprietor client enters the office and she requests the chartered accountant to attest the ITR of her husband and her mother in law. Now, chartered accountant had never met that lady, but he generally inquired as to why is that required, and she explained it is required for loan purpose or visa purpose, whatever. Then the chartered accountant verified the ITR because he had not filed them, but she had brought the hard copy and she had brought other details from which he could verify the veracity or the correctness of that particular document. And he issued a very proper certificate as per the guidelines of the institute, because you may be aware that you cannot certify the income just like that. You have to give a very guarded opinion saying that it is not the income that you are certifying, but that it is based on the document available in the public domain and it is as per the ITR submitted. That way, he gave a proper certificate, but within a month's time, he received a complaint from the husband of that lady claiming that how, without his written authority, he parted with this attested ITR to his wife because the wife had filed a case of domestic violence in the court of law against him. That is why you can't ever guess as to what would be the purpose of issuing this certificate or what is the purpose of obtaining such certificates. Then, friends, I can share a very interesting decided case which is reported also. And it is very interesting, fortunately, and for a change in favor of the chartered accountant. But that underlines how minutely we should read the clauses of the misconduct which are there in the first schedule and second schedule to the Act. Friends, there was a company in whose income tax assessment there was a huge addition of about 25 crores. Now they approached a chartered accountant, and the chartered accountant was very senior, so they approached him for filing the appeal and for contesting the appeal. Now he told them he would charge a fee which is such and such percentage of the total addition made to the income. Then they said fair enough. He fought the case. There were 7 or 8 grounds of appeal. He won. He succeeded in a few grounds. He succeeded totally, failed in a few grounds. There was a part relief. And overall, there was a good relief to the company. Then, as per their agreement, he raised an invoice saying that as agreed, my fee is such and such percentage of the total addition of 25 crores. The company wrote to him that it is unethical under the CA Act to charge any fee on the percentage basis. Now, I'll give only 10 seconds for you to apply your mind and to form your opinion as to what would be your reaction to this. I don't want to test your knowledge or test your thinking capacity, but just 10 seconds, and then you will, fortunately for this particular matter, the counsel for the chartered accountant was a very brilliant one and he made a very brilliant argument. because we have, some notions about the misconduct items. He said that what is prohibited or what is misconduct is the charging on the outcome or the result of your work. This chartered accountant had not charged on the result of his work. He had charged it on the entire addition made, because he argued that my efforts and my inputs were pertaining to the entire, say, 8 or 10 grounds were there. He had to look for the cases, he had to look for the facts, he had to organize the papers for all the 8 to 10 grounds. So the results are immaterial; those are not within his hands. But he has charged based on his principles or his input, and not on the outcome or the result of the case, and that is the crux of the matter. Because many chartered accountants have a very vague idea about this particular clause. But fortunately, the counsel was very brilliant. Maybe the chartered accountant himself had applied his mind before saying so. But these are the niceties of all the items of misconduct, because we read our GST, we read our income tax very minutely and thoroughly. But we are very casual about this code of ethics, because after our final exam, we hardly have ever read these things. But there is another good case. While we did our CA, there was a principle that was inculcated in our mind, that auditors are only watchdogs and not bloodhounds. But today's scenario is such that the regulators and the public at large are expecting the chartered accountants to be investigators or bloodhounds only, and not as watchdogs. Today, it is a very sad story about our profession, friends, that hundreds of chartered accountants are on bail and dozens of them are in jail, because it has become very standard practice that whenever there are frauds, whenever there are scams, the public reaction is that auditor kya kar raha tha? And the government's perception is also, we have to understand the government's perception, and we need to introspect. The government says that so far in our country, thousands of huge frauds involving huge amounts have been committed, and there is hardly, or not even not a single fraud which has been exposed by the auditor. What does it mean? That means the government's perception is that the auditors are doing nothing but the accommodation of the clients. And if we introspect to great extent, we have to accept this fact. There are many practical reasons for this. I don't blame the chartered accountants, but then we really wonder whether this profession is really independent. Whether there can ever be any independence to this profession. So long as the client himself is paying our fees on which our survival is dependent, how can, or whether we can really afford to be independent? And that is the main, pain point for other profession, because we can never ever be independent, which I have to put it very bluntly and honestly. But anyway, we are trying to improvise the degree of our independence, but there are inherent limitations in that. Now, the third case, very interesting, very eye opening again. A very senior firm with existence of more than 80 years. Now, they were handling the audit and tax audit of a private limited company which consisted of only two shareholders, two members, and both were brothers of each other. Obviously, there was some friction, because that is my observation, that any commercial or financial relationship, howsoever sweet it may be, it has to one day or the other result into some disputes or the friction. And one has to keep very, very careful where one has to be to avoid such frictions. For a profession, perhaps things would be a little different, but in a business relationship, the disputes are bound to be there and they're inevitable. Now, here what happened was, suppose 30th September was the last date of submission of the returns. So on 25th or 26th September, the younger director, who was holding 40% of the shares, he approached the chartered accountant and he said, "Sir, as usual, you have done the audit, because the firm was very senior and reputed and all the systems were in place. Therefore, they were really doing the proper audit." So he said, "Sir, as usual, you put your signature. I will obtain my brother's signature because he is very busy just now, and I will myself file the return so that there is no non-compliance." Chartered accountant said, fair enough, because the relationship was that of more than 25 years and they were a trusted relationship. So he put his signatures on the hard copy, handed it over to that director. That remember that younger director, he obtained his brother's signature, but never put his own signature. That means he had a scheming mind. And he submitted the returns, uploaded it, and filed a complaint against the chartered accountants on two counts, which are really interesting and eye opening. The first ground was that under the Companies Act, the balance sheet has to be or financials have to be signed by two directors at least, whereas here only one director had signed, and therefore it is a violation of the Companies Act, and therefore the chartered accountant has committed a misconduct. Now, here at this juncture, I must bring out to your notice that what is important under the Companies Act is not merely the signatures of two or three directors, but the utmost important thing is the approval of financial statements in the board of directors meeting. Unfortunately, we do practically everything for the client. All the paperwork, including queries, their reply, their MRL, everything we only prepare. That is a fact, sad fact of the life. But we do not obtain one single confirmation from them saying that these financial statements were approved in the board meeting held on such and such date. I would strongly recommend all the participants that every year they should make it a point that they should obtain a letter from all the from any responsible person that these particular accounts were approved in the board meeting such and so that at least the first stage you have a confirmation. There is another thing to this, very common thing, because what I am dealing with the chartered accountants, where our average chartered accountant, which has to face all these things. See, usually in a group, only one or two persons, normally only one person interacts with the chartered accountant. Only one person deals with the chartered accountant. Now, when there is a dispute between that particular person and the other members of the group, what they do is they simply disown all the statements. They simply disown the statement and they say that this our man, particular one of the directors, who was interacting with the chartered accountant and they were in hand in gloves, and what gafla they did, we are not aware. And we are not even aware of these financial statements. Meetings were never called. As you know, the greatest drawback about chartered accountants, there are many drawbacks, but one of the important ones is that, firstly, in a lighter vein, one person said that one of the greatest drawbacks is that we are always available. Meanwhile, we cannot afford to say no to any client. That is one thing. And secondly, what we do is we do many things in good faith. So here he said that what was important was the approval in the board meeting. But whenever there are such situations, they disclaim that there was no meeting ever held, they never received any notice. So the second drawback is that about secretarial records we never ever verify. And since company secretarial work is always taken very lightly, all the resolutions are just generated on the computer and submitted to the bank, to the authorities, and many other places. But the actual minute book, because chartered accountant and the professional do not, unfortunately, understand the sanctity of the book minutes containing the minutes and other things. So notices are never issued; they are all in the air. Then minutes are never written. So, because of this, many decisions which are having a bearing on your financial affairs are not recorded at all. There are many cases coming from this particular front. So, first and foremost thing is that the secretarial records one has to verify very carefully, and if required, you appoint some other company secretary to ensure that the compliances are there. We take things very, very lightly, and many complaints arise out of that. That is why I'm again repeatedly saying that I'm cautioning the audience. The second ground, again, is very interesting. He said that one of the cars of the company is registered only in the name of that elder brother individually and not in the name of the company. And the auditor has not made any remark in the report. Now, friends, again, we'll wonder, and many people will come forward arguing that, अरे उसका नाम पे नहीं है कंपनी के तो क्या हुआ अंडर द इनकम टैक्स एक्ट डेप्रिसिएशन इज allowable even if it is registered in the individual name of a director or a partner, still the firm or the company gets the depreciation. But friends, that is the reason is that we are too much obsessed with the taxation. We are too much obsessed with the implication in the taxation, but we rather overlook the fact that when you are certifying the assets and liabilities of a particular entity, then it is our basic duty to verify whether the asset really stand in that entity's name. Otherwise, there has to be a remark in the notes on account or somewhere that these particular assets, and it is very common fact that the vehicles are often registered in the names of the individuals. They are hardly ever registered in the names of the companies for practical reasons. So remember, and this chartered accountants themselves are not aware of this particular serious thing. That is why we do not train or we are not able to train our people. In fact, the soul of our chartered accountancy profession is our working papers. But working papers, we are ourselves quite loose about that. And that is why working papers and ultimately who is going to generate the working papers? The working papers are going to be generated by your articles and your staff. If they are not properly trained, unfortunately, chartered accountants do not pay much attention to the training of themselves and training of their staff. In fact, it is a sad story that the people have a perception that chartered accountant जो है ना वो सब मैनेज करने वाले लोग हैं. Now, manage करने वाले लोग हैं to the extent that even chartered accountants manage even the CPE hours also. In fact, we are sitting in the CPE committee, but it is a very common experience that the enrollment is that of 2 to 300 and actual attendance is 35 to 40 and everybody gets the CPE hours. So then one wonders as to who is really unethical. And so, please excuse me because I have been very blunt about it. So unless we introspect, I don't think there is a good future to the profession. So so this now you will wonder and will ask me if you are awake and attentive that if despite such a long and cordial relationship, why this younger brother filed a complaint against the chartered accountants? What was the reason for victimization? And it is all the more serious and interesting. That particular director had approached the firm to accommodate his daughter as a dummy article, which the firm had refused. So, to have a vengeance for that, he victimized the chartered account. So, remember that you cannot afford to antagonize any client or any person. So much of nuisance value they have. Now, there is another landmark decision in the context of case study or in the context of our disciplinary cases that bloodhound and watchdog I have told you. Now, the government's expectation is that because of this automation, many of the mundane things chartered accountants are relieved of. Earlier, in 30, 40 years ago, when I did my articles, that time the manual accounts were there and the tallying of trial balance was a celebration. Now, here you are not expected to do any mundane or petty things, so you have to concentrate on something which is creative and there has to be application of mind. But the professional skepticism is utterly lacking. In fact, in an organization in the checklist, there was a really very disturbing and very disgusting remark that please avoid bringing chartered accountant certificates as the same are often found unreliable. This was the remark published in the checklist of an organization. So one has to really introspect as to what you are doing and how the things you are doing. Now, there is one more case, which is a landmark decision. They say that all errors are not misconduct. Even the blunder is not a misconduct. Even a negligence is not a misconduct. Court held that there has to be a gross negligence, or now they have added lack of due diligence. Now, I will explain to you the distinction between gross negligence and lack of due diligence. So, they say gross negligence, there has to be an element of ill motive or dishonesty. Now, if you make this argument before the disciplinary committee, they counter argue and very rightly so. They say that suppose you have a good friend of yours who is an honest person, who is an engineer, and he doesn't know much of accounts. He may come to you and he will request that his accountant has prepared his financial statement, so he requests you to sign. Now you know that he is an honest person, he doesn't do any hanky panky, and because of his bank loan, you are signing just blindly. And if something goes wrong, then you cannot argue that I never had ill motive or dishonest intentions. Because one of the items of misconduct is certifying any financial statement without verification, and without verification by whom? By your partner or your staff. If there is no such verification by your office, then signing that itself is a misconduct. In fact, signing without verification is itself a dishonesty which people fail to understand and appreciate. That you are signing, you have not verified anything. The chartered accountant's signature is expected to be the hallmark of credibility, which unfortunately is lacking. And therefore, we are very loose. We have ourselves never recognized the value of our own signature, and that is why people are taking it for granted. In fact, the sometimes the quality of financial statements is so pathetic that they do not see even the basic things. But now I come to the distinction between gross negligence and lack of due diligence. Friends, there was a company, the corporate office was in Mumbai, and they had some mines. The mines were somewhere in Orissa or Assam, and the turnover was more than 600 crore rupees, and there was a term loan from a PSU bank of 100 crores for machinery. Now, this particular company became a sick unit, and as soon as any such company becomes an NPA, the practice in all the banks, particularly large banks, large private banks, and nationalized banks, is that first scapegoat is the auditor. It is very likely that there must have been or could have been a collusion between the bank's management and the company's management. But just to protect the skin of their own staff and management, the banks first and foremost thing they do is to file a complaint against the chartered accountants in the default misconduct as lack of due diligence or gross negligence. Now, here they had maintained for a change wonderful and excellent working paper. So I was also impressed by that. And I complimented them that very nice working papers you have maintained. So we have submitted all that. Thereafter, there were two queries from the institute side, and these are very eye opening again, friends. There were only two small points. Firstly, they wrote whether you had verified or returned to the bank for the confirmation of the bank statements or the balances. The chartered accountant said, "Sir, we had not written, but basically all the photocopies of the bank statements we are having in our possession as our working papers, and the accounts are reconciled." I said, "Excellent, then you can send them." Then they told me, "Sir, it was a CBI matter, it was a big scam, and 80% of the documents in that company, including bank statements, were fabricated." So even the bank statements were fabricated. So you can imagine to what extent when there was some local cooperative bank and all, and if the bank perhaps never existed also. So this is now in so far as they had obtained the bank statements, you cannot say that they are grossly negligent, because that is they have followed the accounting standards, auditing standard, and they have obtained the working paper. That is one. But when it comes to because another essay is that it is third party evidence. Now, today's world, third party evidence has assumed utmost importance, and which we are totally lacking in that. So, because of that, now since they had not verified with the bank, nor the second the thing was that, have you written to the debtors and creditors for confirmation? They said no, we had not written. And that is lack of due diligence. So I hope I have made it clear that so long as you have obtained the necessary documents, yes, you are not a grossly negligent person. But so long as it comes to non-verification with the third party, yes, there is a lack of due diligence. I hope I am very clear. So, because please excuse me that I am just rushing through all these cases. In fact, sometimes now this professional skepticism, professional skepticism lies in a fact that a very large company, say 10,000 crore turnover, listed company, and that company uh, they have huge stock of say 6 to 700 crores. And at the aim of affairs, all big professionals, very heavyweights in auditor, chart, this company secretary, legal team, great people are there in the team. But they want very on an urgent basis, they want the stock statements to be certified by a chartered accountant. And remember, usually the big firms are their auditors and they never ever give any urgent certificate. In fact, they avoid certifying the things. Now, what is professional skepticism? They catch hold of a very small chartered accountant in some other city and they ask him that if you certify this our stock statement within 3 to 4 days, we will pay you even 1 lakh rupees fees. Now that young fresh chartered accountant gets tempted. ही फील्स अरे इतना बड़ा कंपनी है लिस्टेड कंपनी है सब ग्लॉसी पेपर पे फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स है बड़े बड़े लोग उनके टीम में है तो ये सब ठीक रहेगा एंड देयर सिस्टम्स आल्सो विल बी ऑल राइट सो he rather blindly certifies them and he has not a single piece of working paper like who were the teammates who visited their locations where the stocks were located nothing he has where are the calculations where are the stock inventory statements nothing he has. Professional skepticism is, or rather, it means that he should think that such a big company, why are they approaching me with such a small person for this particular type of work? If that question he asks for himself, for example, friends, I happen to be a director of a small cooperative bank. Now, very large corporates whose requirement is 1500, 2000 crores, they approach us, whereas our limit of lending is say 200 crores. And if such company approaches, so the first question arises in our mind is that why they are approaching this small cooperative bank at all? That means do they intend to pressurize us, to pressurize the bank for this loan? So such questions should arise in the mind of the chartered accountants. There was a case where it was so dangerous that a lady who was very familiar with the firm, she and she was very familiar. So there was a good faith. So the chartered accountants somehow there was a friction between the chartered accountant and that lady, and she misused the mobile phone of that chartered accountant and sent very dirty and obscene messages to herself just to victimize that chartered accountant. The poor chartered accountant was in jail and also is facing the disciplinary mechanism, saying bringing disrepute to the profession. Now I'll explain to you the difference between the complaint and the information. See, there are two things, sources from which the complaints arise. I'll also deal with the NAFRA cases because those are also very important and those are in public domain. In fact, NAFRA, there was a very landmark case of a very large corporate which was into housing finance. And that particular company, the bubble of that company got burst in the year 1718. And what the position was that they used to appoint their statutory auditors in the annual general meeting. And for last 15 years, they have been appointing the branch audit. They had some 200 odd branches, and there were some 40 to 50 chartered accountant firms to which they used to allot 4 or 5 branches. And the statutory auditor, after being appointed in the AGM, the board used to write to the respective auditors saying that the board has appointed you as the branch auditor for these particular branches. The report is to be addressed to the statutory auditors, not to the members, unlike a statutory audit report. And the guidelines for your audit verification are like this. And this was the overall scenario that this is, and the remuneration will be paid by the company. Now, friends, there was no clarity as to what exactly was the relationship of these CA firms. So the first objection which NAFRA raised was that your appointment itself is invalid because under the 2013 Act, under section 143(8), the appointment of branch auditors also has to be made in the AGM and not in the board. But this position was changed in the Act of 2013 and this particular year was 1718, whereas this particular thing was continuing for last 15 years. Now, without application of mind as to there is a change in the law and all, everything was going just like that as before. So the first thing was that your appointment itself was invalid. So then the chartered accountants argued that if we are not the statutory auditors, then you don't have jurisdiction on us. Now, there was one more, there were many points which they had raised, but one more interesting point which again should be known by all the chartered accountants because we take it very lightly, friends. The second ground was that you have not issued an engagement letter to the client. Now, engagement letter, people are not even aware as to what is the seriousness and mandatory aspect of that. Many chartered accountants have said that they did not even obtain the appointment letter, but just because under the Companies Act it has become mandatory, now we have started obtaining. Otherwise, everything was good faith ka mamla tha. So, chartered accountants now appointment letter, after receiving the appointment letter under SA 210, you are supposed to issue an engagement letter which will contain the modus operandi of the audit as to how many places you will visit, how many locations you will visit, how many staff members you will deploy. All these, what are the definition of your out of pocket expenses, how they will be borne. All that has to be given in the even a MRL, friends, management representation letter, we take it so lightly that we just simply give stock statements, cash bank statements, and nothing beyond that. But there were cases where large corporates, earlier, the nationalized banks had a system of giving unsecured loans to the companies up to 50 crores. Now, in one particular case, there was last 3 years that company was receiving unsecured loan from a nationalized bank, but it was not appearing in their accounts at all. And that was so glaring. And then, when suddenly the bank decided and they took a decision that because the amount, the magnitude of the loan is such that they should convert it into the secured loan, that time the charge was to be created, and that time this was exposed. And that was never in the balance sheet at all of the 3 years. And the amounts involved were 25 crores, 30 crores, and 40 crores for 3 consecutive years. Why this happened? This happened because we never obtain in the initial information as to which are the bank accounts the entity has. This information we never obtain. And it is very likely that in some account which is not forming part of your books of account, there could be some fishy transactions. So, by this experience, I hope the participants will understand as to what is the gravity of the working papers. So, you should always obtain what are the authority, what is the authority structure, who is authorized to sign, then where are the bank accounts located. All that we need to have information at the time of your appointment. And every year in the MRL, you should keep on updating it. These are petty things, friends, but are having great significance. Now, in a club, so there were 3 to 400. How sometimes natural calamities also sometimes work as a blessing in disguise. There was a club which was having a community hall, and there were 3 to 400 members. Now, the manager who was there was like just like a trustee because he was very senior and respected, trustworthy person, having worked there for about 27 years. Now, what he used to do was the for members, for example, the hall rent was 10,000, and for others it was 20,000. Now, when any person came for booking, what this manager used to do was he was just obtaining signature on the blank forms or the application, and he used to take 20,000 if he was an outsider, and he used to issue receipt of 20,000. There was no issue on that. But in the internal records, he used to write the name of some of the members. Now, all these things had to be endorsed by the secretary, but secretary in a hurry used to just endorse it blindly, having a faith in this particular manager. And he would not remember the names of all 3 to 400 members. So this was going on for years together. But unfortunately for that manager, and fortunately for the public, in the COVID period, the bookings of halls were cancelled, and there was a necessary to refund the booking amount. And that time, people made a halla gulla by saying that we had paid 20,000 rupees, we have a receipt of 20,000, whereas in the records of the club, it was only 10,000 rupees. That time, this was exposed. So, these are all indicative as to what extent your verification should go. Now, again, a very interesting case that occurred recently. There was a gymnasium company. Now, they had a plan to expand it at 9 additional locations. Now, additional locations, 9 locations, the equipment of the gym was 3 crores per location. So they had applied for a loan of 27 crores, which was sanctioned. Now, out of that, 25 to 26 crores were disbursed directly to the vendor. And one of the clauses of the loan sanction was that there should be utilization certificate by a chartered accountant. Now, this chartered accountant, I know him personally, very conscientious person, very senior, above the age of 70, and he would not do anything lightly, and wrongly to never. But what happened was he he saw that this particular company was very reputed, gymnasium company was very reputed in the locality. The bank had had released the sum of 25 crore rupees to the vendor. Now, what more you need for utilization? No, he asked the question, where is the equipment? Why is it not there in place? The company told the person that our some of the interior is still pending. That is why the equipment is delivery not done. Because of that, now it is a good matter of good faith. So it was revealed that the entire 25 crores was tendered by the company. The vendor had passed it on to the holding company of that gym company, and the money had gone haywire. So now sometimes we wonder, and I throw it open to the audience as to under this scenario, what more he could have verified. What we, in fact, such brainstorming needs to be there in our offices and among the unfortunately, in our study circles meeting and all, we concentrate unnecessarily on the tax matters, the company law matters, the GST and other things. Well, that is necessary. But the matters which are directly concerning for our own survival and safety, we are very much lacking. We are not very serious about it. So such cases should be discussed as a matter of policy, and they should be brainstormed as to how we should handle these things. In fact, there are many things. Now, today only the Supreme Court decision which has come in the social media that whenever there are such scams, the auditor cannot be held responsible for abatement. Now, that abatement he cannot be held responsible because he very rarely the chartered accountant is directly involved into any criminal thing. But ethics, chartered accountants, they have a wrong notion about ethics. They say, sir, हमको fee भी नहीं मिला है. Without beyond the fees, we have not received a single farthing. All that they are on, they are not dishonest. They are very honest. But mere honesty is not ethical. Remember, one has to follow the practices which are prescribed by the institute, like accounting standards, standards on auditing. Now, unless you comply with it, there is a procedure. For example, if a director gives a prescription without diagnosing much through the proper technology and without proper report, even if he prescribes proper medicine, perhaps he can be caught under the misconduct because he had not gone or followed the proper procedure. So this is the same thing that work should not only be done, but it should be seen that it is done. That is one. And the faintest of ink is stronger than the strongest of memories. So documentation is, fortunately, we our community on practice members in practice, they have devised a course on working papers, and I would appeal to the participants to take benefit of that course because working papers on various occasions for normal audience right up to many people are under an impression that all these things apply only to audit and attest function. And for advisory function, it is not necessary. They are under a very wrong impression. Even for advisory function, there has to be a documentation. And there are many cases because, for example, chartered clients have a habit that they make us work by putting some query on telephone. We should insist that they should send the query in writing. And whatever is the communication, as to, you may raise counter questions as to what other facts. For example, there is section 54 or 54F matter under income tax. Now, should raise counter questions whether they are having any other house or more than two houses, or there are many issues, many factors of exemption under that income tax act. All that it should be on record that you had inquired, because otherwise the clients say that chartered accountant never asked these questions. So all your interaction, your communication between yourself and the client has to be on record. And now there are good gadgets available so that everything can be in writing. So There was another such very interesting matter. Many things are now being exposed as the frauds in the trusts, charitable trusts. We take it very lightly. In fact, there are many such cases which I can share, but I am aware of the paucity of time. But there are cases where management, the senior management, there are some things like management sponsored frauds. And our SA 240 recognizes that it is very difficult to detect management sponsored frauds. But friends, excessive faith in some employees. Now there was a trust of medical trust, and the manager lady was there. She was there for last 30 years. What she used to do was, when the any doctor, because all the governing council members were big surgeons and doctors, so whenever they used to go to operation theater, she used to just catch them. Sir, please sign this particular thing because we have to obtain that new X-ray machine. So we have to pay, make the payment. So sign this check, and we have to break that particular FD prematurely. So sign this also. Now she used to encash those FDs, and exact sale proceeds she used to transfer to her own account by using that particular sign check, so that the final balance was always intact. But in the bank statement, there were entries which were masked, which were contra entries. So merely because the last balance is tallying and reconciled does not absolve you from your duty to verify the entire bank statement. Professional skepticism means why these bank statements are having masked entries and Xerox copies only. So original bank statements one has to have. Many things are available in the public domain, for example, in the ROC site, but people are rather very lax about all this verification in the independent. Third party evidence, unfortunately, friends, we are not attaching much importance. Now I'll deal with one or two only cases which you cannot even imagine as to why and by what route you will be unnecessarily victimized, because there are many things which I have to skip. But this is very interesting. I'll share now only two cases which will be really, one has to introspect on that. There was an executor and trustee company which was a 100% subsidiary of a nationalized bank. Now, the function of the executor and trustee company, as you may be aware, is the execution of the wills of the persons who are deceased, who are their clients. Now, that company was executing the will of a particular client who was obviously deceased, and that daughter, married daughter of that particular deceased person, was interacting with the that company, that daughter. Now, she was saying that the interpretation of the particular clause of the will should be such so that she would get more property. But the officers did not listen to her. So she wrote to the directors. Directors also did not heed to her whatever she was saying. So then she got wild. And then she engaged some other chartered accountant to find out the flaws, because then she wanted to teach a lesson to the directors. So she engaged some other chartered accountant, as we unfortunate party that we chartered accountants are never ever united. That is why if we refuse to sign any particular financial statement, there will be hundreds others who will be signing it very willingly. So likewise, this chartered accountant found some flaws, very technical flaws. For example, SA3 cash statement, there was some shortcoming, or in SA18 there was reporting, there was some which had nothing to do with the audit, nor with the true and fair view of the company, nor still with the real grievance of that lady. But then she filed a complaint to the ROC's office. ROC's office summoned the directors and the auditors. The director said, "Sir, this is a very frivolous complaint. This lady has this intention." ROC said, "Yes, I accept that. This is frivolous, so let us make a compounding." So composition money was paid for by the directors and also by the chartered accountant. Now these directors have got scot free, but wherever there is such irregularity, the regulators like ROC, revenue authorities like tax authority, they come across any such thing, then they have a practice now. NSC, BSC, stock exchanges, they cooperative societies registrar, they have a practice of simply forwarding it blindly to the institute as information, because there is no revenue loss, so they don't file a complaint. In fact, friends, now one very small case in two sentences, and then the final case I will deal. Two sentences, friends. One chartered accountant, there was a lady who had prepared a will. She died after 10 to 12 years after preparing the will. And normally, the period, limitation period is earlier 10 years, now it is 7 years. Now, when the will was opened, it was revealed that the chartered accountant had signed it as a witness, but the lady testatrix had not signed it at all. Now, this is a very big thing, but it is the result of good faith. Because, and when we sign as witness, it is something like making a statement on oath that this person has signed in my presence. So, in small things, one has to be very careful. Don't do anything in good faith. And now the last case, because there are hundreds of them, but I have selected only a few just to keep you awake. Now, the last case was that a chartered accountant, he had a very vagabond type of cousin, very bad character person. That cousin took the undue advantage of the relationship and of this charter because he was a direct cousin. He said that he would do some business for which he needs some 5 crores, but he requested the chartered accountant to issue a check of 10% so that he said remaining 90% he will gather from the public, it means like other financiers. Unfortunately, or fortunately rather, people were aware of his character, so nobody gave a single penny to him. But this person was not of a good character. So what he did as a nuisance to the chartered accountant, he deposited that case, a check, got it bounced, and filed a 138 case against his own cousin. Now, you will wonder, ki, otherwise the purpose of that chartered accountant was very laudable, that to help this cousin he had given the check. But then there is an element of unethical thing was that whenever he issued the check, there was no adequate balance in his account, firstly. And secondly, he was fully aware of the fact that that check was never supposed to be presented. It was merely to show it to the people, so that means it could have misled some persons. Because they would have thought that अरे ये चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट ने अगर 50 लाख का चेक दिया है तो हम 5 लाख का चेक आराम से दे सकते हैं. This is the misleading, that is unethical. Sometimes, we do things which are otherwise commendable, which are good, but then we don't realize that there is an element of unethical thing in that. I think, friends, I can go on and on and on, but I once again thank the CP committee and all of you people who have listened to this, hopefully with good attention, and I pray that none of you would ever be getting caught into these clutches of the disciplinary mechanism. Wish you all the best. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Wazir sir. We have a question. Uh, Recently, ICAI has uploaded the exposure draft on the code of ethics and looking for suggestions from member. What is your view on that?
A good point that has been raised now, because chartered accountants are not proactive. Whenever such exposure drafts are released, we are always sleeping. And after the dangerous things are published, finalized, then we start shouting, अरे ये सब nonsense है, ऐसा क्यों किया, वैसा क्यों किया. So I would suggest that, see, now there is no time to deal with the contents of that, but I would suggest that whenever such exposure drafts on, we are on any subject, maybe GST, maybe income tax, maybe anywhere, it is the duty and the opportunity given to the study circles and branches that they should brainstorm on that with some leader, so that they can raise, because our collective representation is not there. Chartered accountants do not show the collective strength. That is why we are always at the begging end. We are always begging for extension, we are begging for the reconsideration, review. So this is the opportune time that all the study circles and branches should have a session to discuss and to explain the implications of these things, so that the proper representation is sent to the government in the Quora, because it's a very thing directly now affecting the auditors or chartered accountants, and unfortunately we are just sleeping over it. So this is the thing that they should do, that they should study under the leadership of some good knowledgeable person, and they should brainstorm on that, and they should send representations.
Thank you so much, CSC and Wazir sir, for that
Thank
insightful
you.
and thought-provoking session on code of ethics case studies. Your deep knowledge, practical perspective, and engaging examples truly made this session an eye opener for all of us. You have not only enlightened us on the ethical framework, but also encouraged us to reflect and uphold integrity in our professional conduct. On behalf of the entire organizing team and participants, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for sharing your valuable time and wisdom with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much and all the best to you.
Thank you so much, sir.
On the topic analysis of recent decision on eligibility of ITC on inward supplies, I might invite CA Arpit Haldia sir. He is a practicing as an advocate presently and has been a practicing CA since 2002 and handles area relating to GST litigation and compliance. He has also authored 9 books on GST. He has been a regular speaker since 2007 in seminar, webinars, and conferences, and his articles have been published on GST, VAT, and direct taxes, and has been a visiting faculty and trainer for members and officials of CGST and SGST. Before inviting CA Dr. Arpit Haldia sir, I would just like to mention that more than 500 participants are have joined this webinar and witnessing the session. Please, Arpit sir, for your session. Thank you.
Thank you, Yash, for the opportunity and the nice introduction. I would, at the outset, I would like to thank CP committee, the in absentia, president and vice president of the committee, Akshat ji, who has taken a lot of hard work to organize this and have been following the entire both of the speakers to have to be on board and have all the setup working. And to Gini ma'am for being here. So thank you to the CP committee and the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on the recent litigations on ITC for the genuine recipients. See, as we all know that input tax credit is the backbone of GST, not only for the taxpayers but also for the litigation, because more than 70% litigation in GST is going for input tax credit only, and out of that majority litigation is for the recipients who had availed the credit but subsequently the registration of the suppliers is cancelled or the supplier is found to be engaged in unlawful activity although the recipient has received the supplies, because as we all know that section 16(2)(c) also there, which not only says that the tax should be paid by the supplier, but it also adds a condition that the tax should be paid by a genuine ITC by the supplier. So the recipient has to see that not only the tax has been paid by the supplier, but also the supplies which the supplier had received, the inward supplies which were received by the supplier were also genuine. So this marks a substantial compliance burden on the recipient. And as we all know, that the infrastructure which is presently there to verify and check as a recipient is nothing, because he does not have an access to the data of the supplier. He does not have an access to the data of from whom the supplier has received the inward supplies. So there is a very big challenge for the recipient to avail the credit first and then to avoid the litigation. As the participants who have joined might be knowing that for 2018-19, the last date for issuance of the notice was 30th June 2025, and for 2019-20, it was 30th September 2025 for the under section 74. So for the supplies which were received as back as 6 years down the line, the notices were received in June 2025 and September 2025, stating that your supplier is non-existent. Now the recipient is left perplexed, setting that in how in 2025 he would be able to prove that in 2018 or 2019 his supplier existed at the place from where he made the supplies. So there are many challenges, and some recent decisions are there which support the cause of a genuine recipient. So most of us would be knowing the latest decision of Honorable Apex Court in Master Shanti Kiran. But not only that case, but also other cases which are coming from Allahabad High Court, which are there and which helps us as a person who is into litigation to build upon a case. See, case is not at the stage lost or won at the stage at the time of adjudication. Adjudication is the first step in litigation. After that, then there is an appeal before the Commission of Appeals, then there is an appeal before the tribunal, then there is an appeal before the High Court, and then the Supreme Court. So the case is not lost or won at the time of adjudication. This is only the first step. But whatever we submit, whatever we argue at the point of adjudication becomes the foundation for that case. So it is very important that whenever we are making a submission in such cases, how we are building a foundation for the case. May it be a case that the officer at the adjudicating level might not be accepting a submission, but that submission which we are making at the time of adjudication becomes the foundation for the subsequent litigation, because there is Rule 112 in CGST rules, which specifically provides that any new evidence which a taxpayer wants to submit at the time of appeal or submit at the time of appeal before the Commission of Appeals or an appeal before the tribunal. The tribunal and the appellate authority are well within their rights to reject any fresh evidence being submitted during the course of appeal. And they might ask that why you are submitting it before us, why you did not submit it before the assessing authority. What prevented you to submit these evidences at the time of adjudication? And if no proper reason or an exception is carved out, which is given there in Rule 112, then the appellate authority or tribunal might reject the submission of fresh evidence. A question might come that why they would be rejecting submission of fresh evidence. The reason behind is that whenever we file an appeal, there are two equal stakeholders before the appellate authority or tribunal. One is the taxpayer and second is the department. So whenever they both are coming before the appellate authority, they are having an equal stature. So when it comes onto the department as an authorized representative of the taxpayer, I always argue, or we always argue, that department has to give the facts and evidences in the show cause notice itself. Then the order cannot go beyond the show cause notice. And once an order is passed by the adjudicating authority, the adjudicating authority becomes a functus officio. That he cannot add something to the order or he cannot delete something from the order. So if there is such a condition being put on the adjudicating authority, the same condition is applicable on the taxpayer also, because they both are having the same pedigree before the appellate authority. So if the officer is not allowed to add something to the order, then how come the taxpayer should also be then how come the taxpayer be allowed to submit a fresh evidence? And if he wants to submit a fresh evidence, then an exception has to be brought on record that either he was not allowed to submit, he was not given a proper opportunity to submit, or there was something else which prevented him from submitting that evidence. That becomes a very big condition, an onerous condition on the taxpayer. And believe me, if the appeal is rejected merely because the counsel of the taxpayer did not submit that evidence, the client will come to us that, sir, what prevented you to submit those evidence at the adjudication stage? Why did not you ask me for those evidences? I could have provided it and we could have submitted at the adjudication level. So our entire session for today is precisely to how to build a foundation for such cases when we are going and appearing before the adjudicating officer. See, before the appellate authority or the tribunal, as and when it is constituted, all the legal grounds can be taken. Even though the legal grounds might not have been taken before the adjudicating authority, it can be taken subsequently before the appellate authority or the tribunal. But any new fact or any new evidence it has to be invariably submitted before the adjudicating authority unless something exceptional prevented the taxpayer or the counsel of the taxpayer from submitting those evidences. So this is the background of the discussion which we would be having today. So is the screen visible, Yash?
It is visible.
Yes, yes, you can continue.
So see how I take a session. I always start with the very basic thing, which is governing that topic. And the topic relating to ITC is being governed by Article 300 capital A of the Constitution. Because any law which is there in the country, it has to be within the four corners which have been given under the Constitution. It cannot go beyond the boundaries set out by the Constitution. So the basic article or the provision which is governing in Constitution for ITC is Article 300 capital A and which says no person shall be deprived of his property save by the authority of the law. So if something is my property, I can only be deprived of it by the authority of the law. Now, seeing this in the context of input tax credit, the term property can be linked with ITC. So if I substitute property with ITC, I can always say no person shall be deprived of his ITC save by the authority of the law. So when ITC becomes my property, I have an apprehension that ITC would be my property. It is not covered by Article 300 capital A. Once I satisfy the conditions which have been provided in the statute, then ITC becomes my property. So what are the conditions which have been provided in the statute? Section 16 subsection 1 and section 16 subsection 2. And if I roughly say section 16 subsection 4, 17, 18 I am not taking because primarily they are linked with the reversal part or satisfaction in certain exceptional cases. But generally it is section 16 of CGST Act. So whatever has been provided in section 16 of the CGST Act, those conditions I have to satisfy, then input tax credit will become my property. Once it becomes my property, then it can only be then I can only be deprived of it by the authority of the law. Now the question comes, what is meant by the term law? Law is an enactment which has been passed by the legislature. Law does not mean a circular, a press release or a tweet or a notification which has been made without the enabling provision in the legislature. And that enabling provision in the legislature has to satisfy the conditions of Article 14, 19 and 21 of the Constitution. So when I read the term law in Article 300 capital A, it has to be a valid law in terms of Article 14, 19 and 21. Or if it is a part of a delegated legislation of a rule or a notification or circular, then it has to be under a valid delegated piece of the law. So Article 300 capital A, ITC becomes my property only if I satisfy the conditions. Secondly, I can only be deprived of the ITC once it becomes my property by a valid law as per the constitutional provisions. So now another question would come, sir, then if I have to satisfy all the conditions of section 16, then 16(2)(c) provide the condition that the taxpayer should pay, the supplier should have paid the tax. So how can a recipient fulfill that condition? So again, when we read through the condition of section 16, they have to be in line with the provisions of the Constitution, Article 14, 19 and 21. And secondly, I cannot be asked to perform something which is beyond my capability. Lex not cogit ad impossibilia. So we have to read Article 300 capital A in the context of the constitutional provisions and in the context of the doing something which is within my possibility. So this is Article 300 capital A. Now, what we have discussed in Article 300 capital A, that ITC would become my property only upon the satisfaction of the conditions. And this has been laid down and approved in many of the Supreme Court decisions, that ITC is a benefit, not a vested right. So the first thing which we need to keep out of our mind is ITC is not my vested right. Merely I become registered in GST, I would not be able to claim the ITC. I can only claim the ITC once I fulfill those conditions, only to the extent they are within my capability. So ITC is a benefit and a concession, not a vested right, which has been laid down in many of the judgments of the Apex Court, which can be referred through the presentation also. Now, in the background of Article 300 capital A and secondly ITC not being a vested right but a benefit and a concession, we have to read Section 155 of CGST Act. And Section 155 of CGST Act says that where any person claims that he is eligible for input tax credit under this Act, the burden of proving such claim shall lie on such person. So Article 300 capital A, ITC not being a vested right, and Section 155, they have to be read together. So Section 155 casts a burden on the recipient that if you want to claim that you are eligible for ITC, it is your responsibility to prove such a claim. It is not the responsibility of the department to say that you are not eligible for the claim. It is your responsibility to prove that you are correct. How this is different from other things? See, we go through Section 59. Section 59 says of CGST Act, it says every registered person shall self-assess the taxes payable under this Act and furnish a return for each tax paid as specified under Section 39. So when I am filing a return, I am making a self-assessment. And once I am making a self-assessment, if that assessment is not correct, the burden to prove that that assessment was not correct is on the person who is making an allegation against me. So if I've shown some outward liabilities, say at the rate of 12%, but the department is making an allegation that it has to be taxable at the rate of 18%. The burden is on the department to prove that I have incorrectly assessed the liability. The burden is not upon me to prove that I have correctly assessed the liability. The first burden is on the department, and then the onus shifts upon me to prove that why the allegation made by the department is incorrect. And that is why Section 155 has been brought into CGST Act. Because if Section 155 would not have been in the statute, in case of ITC also, the burden would have been on the department to prove that why I am incorrect. But since Section 155 is there, the burden is upon me to prove that why I am correct. Now, how that burden would be discharged, and once that burden is discharged, how the onus would shift on the department, this is the entire gamut of the litigation. So supposedly, I am a taxpayer. I have availed the ITC. Now, department serves me a notice that you have availed an ITC against a supply made by Mr. X. That Mr. X is not non-existent. So why not ITC should be denied to you along with interest and penalty? So now since Section 155 is there and the allegation has been made against me that I have received the inward supplies from a non-existent supplier, the first burden is upon me to prove that I have genuinely received the supplies and I am a genuine recipient. How would I be able to prove that? That is coming from State of Karnataka versus Messrs. Ecom Gill Coffee Trading Private Limited, Honorable Apex Court in March 2023. wherein for the perimeter section 70 of the Karnataka Value Added Tax, which is perimeter to section 155 of CGST Act, Honorable Apex Court clearly said that mere production of invoices and payment by check is not sufficient to prove and discharge the burden. So how would as a recipient I would be able to discharge the burden? I have to satisfy 5 conditions. What are those 5 conditions? I have to furnish the name and address of the selling dealer. I have to furnish the details of the vehicle which has delivered the goods. I have to furnish the proof of payment of freight charges. I have to furnish proof of acknowledgement of taking of delivery of the goods. And I have to furnish proof of tax invoice and payment particulars. These are broadly 6 things we have to submit. And once I submit those things or evidences, I have discharged my burden to prove, which has been casted under section 155 of CGST Act. So whenever I am receiving a notice alleging that the credit is ineligible to me, supposedly on an extent of my supplier is not existent, or the supplier has not paid the tax, or the goods have not been received, XYZ, whatever is the allegation. The first thing which I need to do is to discharge the burden which has been casted under section 155, and which can be discharged by furnishing these 6 things: name, address of the selling dealer, details of the vehicles in which the goods were delivered, payment of freight charges, acknowledgement of taking of delivery of the goods, tax invoices and payment particulars. Once I submit, then the onus would shift upon the department. And what happens when the onus shifts upon the department, that we will discuss in the next slide. But before that, one more thing. Supposedly, a notice has been received which has only alleged that the tax has not been paid by the supplier. It has neither challenged receipt of the goods, it has neither challenged non-existence of the supplier. Then how would the burden be discharged? See, we see through these 5 points. Honorable Apex Court has never said that you have to submit the proof of tax being paid by the supplier. What they have said, that you have to submit the invoice, you have to submit the payment particular, that is what you have paid to the supplier, not what the supplier has paid to the government. So if the notice has been received only for non-compliance of 16(2)(c) without any allegation of goods not being received or invoice not in possession, we should invariably make this part of our submission of a ground as a fact that since the notice has not alleged any non-compliance on the part of non-receipt of the goods or non-availability of the invoice, it means that the entire burden which has been casted under section 155, read with Ecom Guild Coffee Trading Company judgment of Honorable Apex Court, I have discharged my burden of proof. And on the safer side, if someone wants, they can still submit those evidences. But whether we submit any evidence or not, when only 16(2)(c) has been alleged, I am again emphasizing only 16(2)(c), then this submission, this should be part of our facts. That since the department has not alleged any non-receipt or any non-possession of invoice, the burden under section 155 stands discharged. Because if they would have challenged non-receipt of the goods, they would have invoked section 16(2)(b). If they would have challenged non-possession of the invoice, they would have invoked section 16(2)(a). If they would have challenged both non-possession of the invoice and non-receipt of the goods, they would have invoked section 16(2)(a) and 2(b). So whenever we are into litigation, we have to be very precise that what is the precise allegation that has been made against the taxpayer. And basis upon that, we have to make our submission. So if 16.2a and 2b have been challenged, then all these 5 points or 6 evidences have to be submitted. If only 16.2c has been challenged, then it should be part of our submission as a fact, not as a ground. And once it becomes part of a fact which has not been challenged by the department cannot raise any further allegation at any subsequent level of appeal or appeal before the tribunal. So once we are cleared with the burden of proof being discharged under section 155, then what should be the course of action? Once you receive a notice, you have made a preliminary reply. See, in all such cases, we have to make a preliminary reply. What should be the preliminary reply? The first part should be that the onus or the burden which has been casted under section 155 is being discharged by way of submission of these documents. Once I have submitted these documents, the next ground in my preliminary submission should be that basis upon these documents, I hereby submit that I am a genuine recipient. And Honorable Apex Court, by way of Commissioner of Trade Tax in Delhi versus Method Shanti Kiran India, has clearly held that in the event that selling dealer has failed to deposit the tax collected by him from purchasing dealer, the department would have to proceed against the defaulting selling dealer to recover tax, and ITC cannot be denied to a genuine dealer. This should be the submission only basis upon the document which have been submitted. Now, making this part of our submission, what should be the next contentions in our submission, the preliminary submission which we are making? Now we divide the notice into 5 different parts. And denial of ITC to a recipient can be on account of these 6 issues. First can be that the notice is received merely stating that the registration of the supplier has been cancelled from a retrospective date. Second can be that your supplier was found non-existent during the course of physical verification. Third can be that your supplier has filed GSTR 1, but he has not filed GSTR 3B. Fourth can be that he has neither filed GSTR 1 nor filed GSTR 3B. Fifth can be that your supplier has availed ITC from ingenuine sources without receipt of the actual goods. And sixth would be that there was no movement of the goods. So broadly, we are receiving notices on these 6 issues. So what should be our course of submission? We have already discussed 2 aspects. First, discharge of the burden of proof under section 155. Second, reference to myself being a genuine recipient and reliance upon the judgment of the court. Third, now we would not be going on to the merit aspect. We would now be shifting the onus to the department and asking certain questions from them and asking them to provide certain relevant documents to us. See, once I have discharged my burden, now it is upon the department to make a case against me. They cannot just say that we have an apprehension and we are making a case and you are required to pay the reverse the ITC. Since I have discharged my burden under section 155, now the onus shifts upon them to prove the allegation which they have made to me. So now what I would be asking, let's say that the notice has been received on account of denial of ITC for the registration of the supplier being cancelled from a retrospective date. I would be asking, post 155 and post making a statement of the making reference to a decision of Apex Court, that you are requested to kindly provide me copy of the show cause notice which was issued to the supplier for cancellation of registration. Department would say that why are you asking? I would say, sir, I am asking it because whether cancellation from a retrospective date was part of the show cause notice which was issued to the tax to my supplier for cancellation of registration. Secondly, I would be asking a copy of the order of the cancellation of registration of the supplier. Then again, department would ask that why you are asking for the copy of the order of the cancellation of registration. I would say, so as per section 107 of the CGST Act, any person aggrieved from the order of the adjudicating authority can file an appeal. Since section 107 uses the term any person who is aggrieved by the order of the adjudicating authority, I, being a recipient, is an aggrieved person from the cancellation of registration of my supplier, and I fall within the four corners of any person. And once I have received the copy of the order, I would file an appeal against the cancellation order that I am an aggrieved person and the registration of my supplier should not be cancelled from a retrospective date. See, section 107 uses the term any person aggrieved from the order of the adjudicating authority. And since the term is used any person, so as a recipient who is an aggrieved party from the cancellation of registration of the supplier, I am well within my right to seek the copy of the order and file an appeal against that order. So these are the first two basic things which I would like to ask from my officer. Second, next part. Supposedly, they have cancelled the registration from a retrospective date on account of supplier being non-existent. The third thing which I would ask is, I would like to have the copy of the physical verification report which was prepared by the officers who visited the premises of the supplier. Whether such visit was made prior to 5th of August 2023 or post 5th of August 2023. Now the department will again ask that why are you asking for 5th of August 2023? I would say that prior to 5th of August 2023, Rule 26 required that before conducting a physical verification, a notice for PV has to be given to the registered person so that he can be present at the time of physical verification. So whether any such notice was served on the supplier to be present at the time of physical verification. Secondly, you are requested to provide me copy of REG 30, that is a report of physical verification, and whether such report was uploaded on the portal. And if the visit was conducted after 5th of August 2023, then post completion of the visit, whether a notice was served on the supplier that you were found non-existent at the time of visit, so are required to show cause why not your registration should be cancelled, basis upon the PV conducted and all the facts being disclosed to the supplier. Along with that, I would also ask a copy of the photograph which was taken of the premises and the details of two witnesses which were present at the time of physical verification. Now question comes, why the details of the two witnesses? The details of two witnesses along with their Aadhaar card or any proof of identity is required to prove that whether at all those two witnesses actually exist. Because once I have received the proof of the identity, as a cross-examination, I would asking a cross-examination of those two witnesses that whether they were present at the time of PV being conducted and whether the PV was actually being conducted and what was the process which was followed during the conduct of physical verification. Now, supposedly, I have been issued a notice for denial of ITC that registration of my supplier has cancelled and he has only filed GSTR 1 but he has not filed GSTR 3B. So the additional grounds which I would be making would be that you are requested to bring on record what were the actions which have been taken against the supplier wherein he has only filed GSTR 1 but not filed 3B. So whether any action under section 7512 has been taken against the supplier for recovery of the tax dues. Because under section 7512, direct attachment of bank account can be made or direct attachment of the property can be made of the supplier. Whether any action under section 76 has been taken against the supplier. And if no such action has been taken, then how come the first action has been initiated against the recipient who is a genuine recipient based upon the discharge of the burden of proof under section 155? Now, fourth scenario that he has neither filed GSTR 1 nor filed 3B. So in that case, I would be making a submission that I have submitted all the invoices. I have submitted all the proof of the payment. You are requested to forward them to the assessing officer of the supplier and ask him to take an action against him under section 76. See, 7512 cannot be invoked in these cases because it is not a self-assessed liability since it has not been declared in GSTR 1. So I would be asking to forward all these invoices and the payment particulars and the movement proof to the assessing officer of the supplier and ask him to take an action against the supplier under section 76. And if no such action has been taken, then how come first action has been taken against the genuine recipient? Now, supposedly notice has been issued because the supplier has availed bogus ITC. They have not questioned the movement or the supplies between me and my supplier. They have questioned the ITC which was availed by the supplier for discharge of his liability and stating that his ITC was ingenuine. So in this case, without going on to the merits, see, this is only a preliminary reply which we are submitting. We are not going on to the merit aspect. We would be submitting a reply on merits post submission of a preliminary reply. We would be asking that what is the evidence on record which states that he has availed bogus ITC? What is the action which has been taken against my supplier? Bogus ITC availed by him. Supposedly, I have received the goods in April 2024. But the bogus ITC which was availed by my supplier was in, say, December 2024. So if my tax has been paid, in April 2024 and the bogus ITC was availed in December 2024, how can my ITC be denied? Merely because the supplier has availed the ITC somewhere subsequent to my supplies. See, all the ground regarding constitutional validity of 16(2)(c, lex not cogit ad impossibly, as we would be making subsequently. Presently, we are making a reply wherein we are asking some information from the officer so that we can make a comprehensive reply. I don't have an obligation once I've satisfied 155 to reply to all the allegations without the department discharging their onus. Now, the sixth issue can be that the allegation has been made that there is no movement of the goods between the supplier and you. Now, in such a case, I would be asking, so what is the action which has been taken against the supplier? What is the evidence on record with the supplier that there was no movement between me and my supplier? If they would say that there was no toll movement of the vehicle. So in that case, I would say, sir, Article 19 of the Constitution gives me a right to carry on my trade. And there is no such restriction that the movement of the vehicle should take place only through the toll routes. Nor there is a condition under CGST Act or Rule 138 that the movement of the vehicle should only from the toll route. Secondly, let's take an example of Rajasthan. Here in Rajasthan, in state highways, there is no FASTag available. There is still manual toll collection being made. So if the vehicle is being moved from a state highway, not from a national highway, then how come it will fulfill the condition of moving through the toll route? Next ground, that CGST Act nowhere provide that your receipt or the movement would only be genuine only if it has moved through the toll of NHAI. By forcing me to pay the toll to prove the genuineness of ITC, the authorities are forcing me to pay a toll fees to NHAI, which is a government authority, not a government. So, without a condition being put in the CGST Act, I am being forced to move my goods through a toll route to prove genuineness, whereas I have submitted all the details of the movement with the vehicle, with the ability, with the proof of payment of freight. And if at all they are ingenuine, the department is free to carry out an investigation against my transporter, against the driver, against the vehicle owner. But they cannot force me to prove my genuineness merely because the vehicles are not moving through the toll, provided I have submitted all the documents which are required as per Ecom Guild Trading Company decision of the Honorable Apex Court. So this is how I would be asking certain documents. Now this is building a foundation of the case, wherein first I discharge my burden of proof under section 155. Then I shift the onus on the department to provide me certain documents basis upon which the allegation has been made. See, sometimes we receive a notice that we have received an alert circular from the higher authorities that your supplier is ingenuine. If we go through section 73 and 74, it says where it appears to the proper officer. That means the opinion has to be formed by the proper officer. It cannot be a borrowed satisfaction from the higher authority. Nowhere the Act says that any alert circular being received from the higher authority is a binding precedent upon the adjudicating authority. On the contrary, it says that the proper officer has to form the opinion. And that opinion has to be formed basis upon the alert circular, basis upon the inquiry being conducted, basis upon the document which I have asked, which forms the basic fundamental of the entire proceedings. So whenever we receive a notice merely on the basis of an alert circular, make it a point that this is only a borrowed satisfaction. This is not a decision which has been arrived by the proper officer, which is a mandatory requirement under section 73 and 74. And if only alert circular is the relevant evidence or the document basis upon which the satisfaction has been arrived, then it has been arrived without any inquiry being conducted by the officer. Alert circular can only be a basis to initiate the proceeding, but cannot be a basis to conclude or affirm a demand against a taxpayer. And why I am insisting upon these documents being asked for? Because if I would not be asking these documents to be provided, I would be losing out on a very important ground. See, all these document which I have made part of my submission is a right given to me to ask me to be provided, because I am a person who has to defend myself, and I cannot be asked to defend myself in absence of proper document which justify the allegation being casted upon me. Because if an allegation is allowed to be made against me without these documents, that means any Tom, Dick, and Harry can come tomorrow and say that I am incorrect. And then I would be running post to pillar and pillar to pillar to justify that I am correct. Therefore, once I discharge my burden of proof under Section 155, in my opinion, these should be documents which should be asked by us from the officer. The question comes, sir, if they do not provide, what would happen? If they do not provide and opt to pass an order against me without providing these documents, then my preliminary objection while filing an appeal would be that this order is sans any evidence, without any proper substantiating evidence, without any document and record which justifies that I have availed incorrect ITC. This entire order is having a absence of jurisdictional fact. The authority did not have an authority to pass against me, making an allegation of suppression of willful misstatement or of fraud when he has nothing on record to prove against me. So, by making this submission, we would be forcing the officer either to provide these documents. Once he provides these documents, then the onus would again shift upon us to challenge those documents and submit a counter submission. But if he opts not to provide, because in most of the cases these documents are never on record, and still the order is being passed against the taxpayer, it would be a very firm, strong case for the assessee to contest before the appellate authority without going into the merits, that the order was passed without any evidence or without any evidence on record. So this is how, in my opinion, we should build a foundation for our case. This is the...
Sorry to interrupt. We have CA Satish Gupta sir, Chairman CP.
Continue this. Yes, please.
Okay.
Let him continue. Okay,
Thank you.
sorry. Please, sorry, Arpit, please continue.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. So, this entire process which we have discussed, it is not that it has not been backed by the courts. Honorable Calcutta High Court in case of Diamond Beverages Private Limited versus Assistant Commissioner of CGST and Central Excise has clearly said that once the onus has been discharged and the appellant is requested the authority to investigate and provide certain documents which are at the supplier's end, then show cause notice cannot be issued merely stating that these are the documents available with us and therefore we are proceeding and moving ahead and issuing the show cause notice. Again, a latest decision or Honorable Allahabad High Court in case of Safecon Life Science Private Limited, wherein precisely this was how the matter went on. That the notice was issued on the basis of information being received about the supplier. The petitioner detailed all the movement in the payment. But the assessing authority and the appellate authority passed an order without giving any weightage to the reply of the taxpayer. And the Honorable Court observed that the appellate authority has passed an order with an eyes closed to the submission which was made by the taxpayer. And Honorable Allahabad High Court specifically said that the process should have been that whatever document which was submitted by the taxpayer, those documents should have been verified by the authority, and they should not have only have been verified by the authority at their end, but they should have also verified from the end of the supplier, and a specific finding should have been brought on record that why the documents or evidences submitted by the supplier by the taxpayer are being rejected. So, in my opinion, whenever we are making a submission, it is all good to make it on the merits. But at the same time, we have to also see that whether there are any procedural lapses, what are the rights which are available to the taxpayer, what are the obligations which are there with the taxpayer. See, in case of transitional credit, why I am saying this? In case of transitional credit, even though I was well entitled on the basis of document which were available with me, be it the invoices or the return filed by me, if my Tran 1 was filed after one day of 27th December 2017, I was not allowed to file my Tran 1, stating that there was a procedure lapse. I said that, sir, I have all the documents. I am submitting those documents. This is only a procedure lapse. This is a substantial. I am fulfilling the substantial condition. Still, the department said that no, we would not be allowing you the credit. And that credit was only allowed to me in 2022 after 5 years after the intervention of the Honorable Apex Court, when my time value of the money was reduced to 50%. A 1 lakh credit availed in 2017 is equivalent to 50,000 availed in 2022. Why? Because I was not in line with the procedural requirement laid down in the law. So when it is a condition upon the taxpayer to follow the procedural requirement, why as a taxpayer, why as a counsel of the taxpayer, we are not alligating or making a ground that the procedural requirement which have to be followed at the end of the officer are not being fulfilled. Because if we are not raising it as a part of the grounds, they would not be decided by the appellate authority subsequently, and the entire matter would only be merit on the basis of a genuine inward supplier. Yes, there is a decision of an Honorable Apex Court now, but again, whether the department would accept it, they would file a review petition, they would move to a 5 judges bench court. It is all not known as of now. So we have to be very careful while we are drafting the reply that what are the preliminary observations which we are making, whether we are discharging the burden of the proof. See, if we would not be discharging the burden of proof and straight away going and say that I ask you to provide me these documents, we would be again making legal error. Because that under section 155 says that you have to prove your eligibility. So I have to submit my eligibility as per section 155. Then I have to ask those documents. If those documents are not provided, I have to make it my preliminary objection, preliminary ground of appeal while I am filing the appeal. Then I should go on to the merit aspect. Okay, sir, I am a genuine supplier. I have all the invoices. 16.2c is unconstitutional. 16.2c asked me to do something impossible. This, those should be the grounds. And one of the skills of drafting is that how you position all the grounds of appeal. See, very regularly we say in the alternative and without prejudice to anything contained above and reserving the right to challenge on merits, I am making this ground. That means the authority has to dispose of the earlier ground first and then come on to the next ground. There is a decision by Honorable Court in GST regime that when the grounds are being made in the alternative, the adjudicating authority or the appellate authority has to dispose of those grounds in the order in which they have been made. They cannot straight away jump onto the 8th ground and dispose of the appeal. So that is why how we draft, what we ask, and how we submit becomes a premier condition for the success of the appeal, even though at the later stages, and although the adjudicating authority might not be accepting what I have stated. Now, concluding with reference to circular number 171. As the participant would be knowing that this is a circular which provided that how the penalty has to be levied or tax has to be recovered in case of bogus invoices or fake supplies. So there are 3 scenarios which have been given in this circular. The first scenario is wherein Mr. A has received genuine supplies, but he has issued invoices without underlying supplier. Many a times our client received in notice that you have made a supply to a non-existent dealer. Therefore, why not a penalty under section 122 subsection 1 clause 2 be levied against you? This is the first scenario. For the ease of simplicity, I have showed it in this way that Mr. A had received goods with proper invoice. But the allegation against him is that he issued invoice without supply of goods. So now I have received goods of rupees 100 and supposedly I have invoiced those goods for 100 rupees only for the sake of simplicity and discussing. The department says that their entire supplies of 100 rupees are fake because the recipient is non-existent. In such cases, I should always ask that if my supplies are genuine, inward supplies are genuine, and if all my outward supplies are ingenuine, as alleged by the department, although I am not agreeing to that fact, then either the department should bring on record that those 100 rupees goods were actually sold without invoice to some other person and invoice was issued to some other person, or those 100 rupees goods are still lying in my stock. And if they are not lying in my stock, nor the department has put forth any evidence that they were supplied without issuance of any invoice, then how come the invoices which have been issued by me can be treated as ingenuine? And how come it could be treated that the goods were supplied without issuance of invoice when no contrary evidence of goods still lying in stock or goods being sold in cash or being as a clandestine removal is there on record? See, we have to make it this as part of submission, because only then the department would counter it, and they would counter it without any evidence because that evidence was never part of the show cause notice. And if they were bringing some new evidence, then they would have to issue a new show cause notice because a new evidence cannot be brought in the previous show cause notice. Second is, they have not challenged my outward supply. They have said that your entire inward supply is bogus. We have once faced a case wherein the client was an exporter, he made a supply of say 100 rupees. The department said that your entire 100 rupees inward supplies are bogus. So then the ground which has to be raised is, say if my outward supplies have not been questioned, and if you are alleging that my inward supplies are bogus, then please bring on record that what were the sources from where I actually purchased the goods without any invoice. Because if the goods were purchased without any invoice and the actual invoices which I am submitting is bogus, then how come the outward supplies were genuine and which you have yourself treated them to be genuine? Then the owners would again shift on the department to prove that there were certain inward supplies which were brought without any invoice, and that's why we are alleging that the invoice which are on record are invalid. The third scenario is wherein the department challenges both the inward supplies and outward supplies. That your 100 rupees inward supplies is ingenuine, your outward 100 rupees supplies is ingenuine. In that case, we have to ask evidences from them as we have discussed earlier. So in the previous two cases, there were some additional requirements which we should have asked. In this case, we should have asked for the requirements which we have discussed earlier as well in the session. This is again a judgment of Honorable Allahabad High Court in case of Patanjali Ayurved Limited, although it was against the taxpayer, but it was such beautiful.
What happened? Yes.
I guess connection. There is some connection issue in.
Okay. Arpit with Arpit. Okay.
Yeah. Meanwhile, its connection gets
Oh.
all right again.
Yeah. फोन कराओ ना उनको, उनका आउट ही हो गया शायद, दोबारा आएंगे.
Yes. We have amidst us CA Satish Kumar Gupta sir, Chairman CPE Committee, He is presently serving as the chairman of the Continuing Professional Education Committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. In addition to this role, he is also the chairman of the UDIN Directorate.
आगे आगे बॉस आगे क्या
जी।
हुआ अर्पित भाई
सर वो जीएसटी जहाँ पे होता है वहाँ टेक्निकल ग्लिच होते हैं so that was my concluding slide also. So with that I would like to conclude my session, and the entire emphasis is that how we perceive the litigation and how we build upon the case, because ultimately the building upon the case is at the time of adjudication, and that is the foundation of the case. So thank you very much to the institute and Satish Gupta sir for giving me this opportunity to share my views on this interesting topic, that how to litigate and how to argue in such cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arpit sir.
so much, sir.
So I was reading out the profile of CA Satish Kumar Gupta sir, a dynamic chairman CP committee. He is presently serving as the chairman of the CP committee of the ICI. In addition to this role, he is also the chairman of the UDIN Directorate and vice chairman of the Committee of Members in Practice for the current term. He previously served as a council member of ICI from 2019 to 2022. He is a renowned speaker and author specializing in income tax assessments, searches, surveys, and professional development topics like goal setting and career planning. I would invite Satish sir for his address.
Thank you, yes, thanks a lot. And my brother Arpit Haldiaji, to whom I believe that he is the mastermind on the GST, and I have seen the way he has developed this expertise in the GST and the hard work he has done. A great person and a great human being. So Arpit Haldiaji, yes, Kunawat, another young leader of the profession from Udaipur and the Lake City, and Gidni Goyal ji, Secretary, CP Committee, Team CP, Team Tech, and my dear friends who, despite having several other schedules, are attending this webinar in a very large number. So it is not a time of welcome, but I place my hearty gratitudes each one of you for attending this webinar. Arpit sir, Yas bhai, and all other team members, and all other my dear friends who are attending this webinar. Few things I would like to share. Number one thing, at CP committee, we are dedicated to ensure the quality and availability of the CP programs. We are working hard, and this is our, I think, 64th webinar this year, and which we are giving for the benefit of our members and profession. And we have a target of at least 100 webinars this year. Apart from webinars, we are holding national conferences, seminars, workshops, and we are opening as much as the CP chapters, CP groups, so we can make CP program available even to the remotest corner of the country. So this is the target of this particular year. And friends, we are coming up with the new CP portal with several new features which you would like to have that particular portal. And one more important thing which the portal will initiate is the real-time CP credit system. Now, friends, after launching of new portal, which we expect somewhere in the month of December, and after that, there will be no CP credit, only on registration basis. It will be exclusively on the participation basis, and participation, how much time the member had participated in that particular conference. So this geofencing will search your mobile number which is registered with the SSP ICI, and every 30 minutes, and every 30 minutes the score will go yes, no. If you are there, there will be yes. If you are not there, there will be no. So by adding all these yes, your credit will be decided by the technology. So this is something which we are bringing. Why we have brought this thing, friends? Friends, CP program is the program which is very important for the profession. Every member have a right to update himself, and you just listen the Arpit bhai, what new things come, new decisions come. So it is very important for all of us to have a updation of the knowledge. Secondly, we are required to get 20 hours physical CP only in a complete calendar year. only 20 hours, around 1.5 or 1.75 hour a month. So this is not so much. So what we decided that yes, it is the right time that we should go bring this particular system of recognizing or giving the CP credit only on real time basis. We need your suggestions, feedback on this particular initiation, so we can improve it according to your suggestions and feedback. Secondly, friends, I am also heading UDIN, and in UDIN we have done three new initiatives this year. I think you like that particular thing. Some one thing was the that auditor's opinion. I think while doing the audit this time, you found and when go for UDIN, they were asking for the auditor's opinion. So this particular requirement is something which will give a base to the institute to represent the profession, that in how many audits our members are giving some adverse opinion, some disclaimer, some qualification. So we were not having those figures. So now after this particular initiation, the institute will be in position to represent. I would like to say very clearly, no other than institute or yourself can see the what you have filled therein. No other one, even your verifier or any stakeholder can do that. Think they can see that particular filling of your form of the UDIN. So this is something which we have brought, and I think when there is a fear that there will be no audit, and the audit is going slowly out of our area. So we thought at the ICI that we should bring certain information to the knowledge of government, that what our members are doing. They are working hard. They are doing qualitative reporting, but we are not in position to give any feedback to the government. So this was being done. Second thing which we have done, friends, that no member would be in position to generate UDIT in respect of 61st tax audit. Suppose my limit is 68 tax audit, we all are aware, and I go for the 61st tax audit, no, UDIN will not permit to use generate UDIN. So this is again for the benefit that by mistake some of the members were doing this particular mistake, that भूल से इकसठ हो गई, and consequences are very vital. So we have done this thing also, and it will give definitely a new opportunity for the profession. That is my mindset, and I hope that it will work. Third thing which we have done in Union is the now, if any audit comes to you, get audit done, don't pay the fees, move to another auditor in next year. And you are in not position to know the name of the succeeding auditor. Now the Union Directorate will tell you the name of succeeding auditor in respect of your that auditee which you want, that he has not paid my fees, or there is something I want to share, communicate with that particular auditor, that these are the things which the auditor should take whenever he go for the audit. So this Union Directorate will tell you the name of the succeeding auditor who has done this audit. So these three things we have implemented in UDIN this year. CP I have already told, and in CMP committee where I am vice chairman, my dear friend, we are working a lot, and we are bringing 7 or 8 type of new opportunities for the profession. One is, I think Dr. Arpit Haldia is aware that we have brought a new course on the GST litigation, and that is getting very good response from the members. Another, we are bringing that this custom practice, our members are not doing much. We are working and we are educating our member that what is the scope in the practice of the custom area, and we have made it 3 days course which is going to be implemented very soon. Third thing which we are going to bring for the profession is the virtual CFO. Fourth thing which we are going to bring is the 360-degree MSME consultancy. Fifth thing which we are going to bring is the super real estate consultant, and other thing also. So we are working hard at CMP so we can give our members new ideas, new areas, new emerging areas, so they can adopt those particular areas for their practice. One more thing which at CMP we are doing, we are bringing several new initiatives directly benefiting to our members. One we have done this time is the unsecured loan from the HDFC Bank, that too at the rate of 10.60%, totally unsecured without collateral. And I think against the rate of 13-14% in the market, it has been bargained very less. So, and surprisingly, I was not expecting that such a big amount our members can take in on few days. I have been informed by the SDFC that more than 20 crores has been taken by our members in only few days, 10-15 days only. So this is going to be spread like anything. And members who are in need, I know that chartered accountants are never in need of the finance. They don't like the finance unsecured or secured, or they don't like this. But in case of need, it is the thing which is available for our members. Second thing, we are bringing a new credit card from the EU Finance Bank Limited, and which is giving good facility to our members. That is lifetime free card, no entry, no joining, no annual fees. But apart from this, in that credit card, our members will get 25% discount in the renewal fees payable to ICI by the member of his membership dues. Suppose I pay 8,000 rupees as my membership fees to the ICI in a year. So abhi, as of now, they are launching it for 1 year, but we are in touch with them that it may be a regular feature. So that member will get paid by through the credit card. The member will get 2,000 rupees relief in paying that fees. And apart from this, there are eight multiples points are also there, and some the domestic airport lounges are also there. So this we have done. We are working a lot on some softwares, audit tools, and this time our institute is working very great, my dear friends, on the aggregation of firms, on the merger of firms, because this is, we should understood very clear. Now there is no time of the proprietorship firms or 2-3 partner firms as far as the big audits are concerned. If your area is the big audit, if your dedicated area is the audit only, then you must start thinking that your firm should be a big size firm. Big size means no 20, 20, 30 partners. It should not be less than 7-8 partners. You go for the merging, you go for the amalgamation, you go for the corporation, you go for the aggregation, but or you go for the corporate form of the practice. But you will have to think, my dear friend, now the time has come when we should think of the aggregation. And our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is also working that how India can make big 100 CA firms. So, in line of that particular thing, our institute is also working very hard. And I think by the 6 months down the line, our country will have at least 10 CA firms which are bigger in size. And we are also working how the equity can be raised by the CA firms, how the loans or the grants can be raised by the CA firms, how the government can relax the terms of audit allotment by them. You find that the audit allotment by the government are not in your reach. Now government is thinking very seriously how the audits may be made within the reach of the Indian firms. So these things are coming, and we should feel happy if but it is not possible if our firms are bigger in size. So, my dear friends, not taking much of your time because it is already 6:15, and we were here to listen. Arpit Bhai, I could get benefit of listening him. It is always music when we listen him. It's something come not only from heart but come from mind also, come from the entire hard work he has done for this profession. So thank you, my dear friends. Thanks a lot for coming in this webinar and giving us the privilege to serve you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. All the best. Thank you, yes, for the time. Thank you, Arpit Bhai, for the time. Thank you, team. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Over
you.
to yes.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Satish sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, CA Arpit Haldia sir, for delivering such an insightful and informative session on the analysis of recent decision on eligibility of ITC on inward supply. Your in-depth understanding and clear articulation of complex rulings truly enriched our knowledge and clarified many practical aspects surrounding ITC eligibility. On behalf of the organizers and all the participants, I express our sincere gratitude for your valuable time, expertise, and engaging presentation. Thank you once again, sir. Now we shall conclude the webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. See you again.